Yesterday I began my newest journey through the Gospel of Luke, and before the day was done, on YouTube a video popped up declaring that Bart Ehrman destroys the crucifixion and resurrection narrative. And I thought, yeah, that sounds a lot like what someone said to Eve in the garden. Did God actually say, no, you won't die if you eat that forbidden fruit? It's common stuff. However, it sets the stage to look at an imaginary account where Bart Ehrman would have to have a debate with Dr. Luke. And I simply want to show you today that when you step back and listen to the professional skeptics like Bart Ehrman tell us what they don't know, because that's what they do. They just say, well, we don't know this, we don't know that. It's like, okay, you don't know that. Got it. But then when you compare it to what the eyewitnesses and the people who were with the eyewitnesses actually were talking about back in the day, it is absolutely remarkable how much is there for us that absolutely builds up our faith. So I'm going to read and share just one opening sentence from Luke's Gospel, and you listen to how many things Luke knew that Bart Ehrman doesn't know. Okay? So Luke chapter 1, Luke begins, inasmuch as many have undertaken to compile a narrative of the things that have been accomplished among us, comma. It's not the full sentence. Luke begins by telling the audience, the people he's writing to, that there are already all kinds of other people who have undertaken to compile a narrative. Not many narratives, but a narrative of the things that have been accomplished among us. Right away, Luke's saying, his testimony, his eyewitness testimony is that there's all kinds of people working to compile what everybody was talking about. You see, you don't get a sense of what happened by simply saying, when was the first record? When is our earliest manuscript? It's like, well, that would just tell you when that particular manuscript was written or found or something. But do you see what Luke's doing? He's telling everybody, okay, by the time I got to where I'm writing this down, I was in the midst of a social network where everybody was talking about this stuff, what was accomplished among us. And that's what Luke is going to testify to. I wish I could say more, but that's just amazing. There's many people, they've undertaken to compile the narrative. So there's fewer people who've undertaken to compile the narrative than the people who've actually talked about it. It's being talked about so much. And as time goes on, people are saying, we've got to compile this. We've got to have a record to continue through the rest of history. So then he continues, just as those who from the beginning were eyewitnesses and ministers of the word have delivered them to us. That's incredible, okay? So there are those, so Luke's referring to people who from the beginning, no gaps between when these things happened and Luke. There's no gaps. There's people who from the beginning have been talking about this. They were eyewitnesses. Luke doesn't need to be an eyewitness to compile the testimony of the eyewitnesses. In a court, a clerk can present a document full of testimony of eyewitnesses without having seen a thing. That's not the point. You don't have to be an eyewitness to compile the testimony of the eyewitnesses. So Luke is writing, he's collecting what the eyewitnesses from the beginning have been telling everybody. The story hasn't changed. And these men were ministers of the word. Okay, who are those? Well, the apostles. The apostles were the ministers of the word. Notice it's called the word. That's a huge issue for me after that book on the more Christ-like cult, claiming that the Bible isn't Christ-like enough, when it's been called the word. What was being proclaimed by the apostles in that first time, that was the word. And it was delivered by them to us. So Luke's saying, I'm telling you what the eyewitnesses who were ministers of the word, who were authorized by Jesus, have told us right from the very beginning. And now myself and others are collecting that to write accounts. And right in there would be Matthew with his account deliberately aimed toward a Jewish audience. I just finished Mark, such a condensed version, but so detailed. And then John's, of course, with such a poetic and beautiful expression of the Word who became flesh. And Luke's saying he's right in the middle of that when people are compiling those things. And then he says, because all that's there, all that's going on, it seemed good to me also, having followed all things closely for some time past, to write an orderly account for you, most excellent Theophilus. So now Luke's telling us that he was going to compile this along with them. He was going to do his own account, and he gives it as a detail. His account is going to be a very detailed compilation of those who were eyewitnesses, with a specific focus of making it so detailed that people would not be able to argue against it. And just so you know, Bart Ehrman can't argue against that. He just tells you, oh, we don't have this or we don't have that. It's like, but I have Luke. I have Dr. Luke, who was in that first time. And he compiled what was being told all over the place. Just like we read in the book of Acts. That's what Luke was talking about. As this stuff was going around, just like we see in the book of Acts, Luke was there, he was traveling with Paul, and he was writing this stuff down and collecting it into what is now the breathed out words of God. I just want to show that when you're listening to a professional skeptic, they can't stand against what Luke saw, what he heard, what he witnessed, what he collected of those who were eyewitnesses of Jesus' crucifixion and his resurrection. He can't argue against that. All he can do is tell you, I don't see this, I don't see that. It's like, okay, I get it, you don't get it. What we have then is Luke has written a more orderly, or an orderly account for this man, Theophilus. And then he gives his purpose, that you may have certainty concerning the things you have been taught. Again, these are details we have to pay attention to. When Luke said, Theophilus, I'm writing you a more orderly or detailed account to help you have confidence in the things you have been taught, it means Theophilus was already being taught these things. These professional skeptics who say nothing was there until the moment it was written in whatever document we have today. It's like, no, Luke said there were already compilations going on, and that when he wrote Luke, Theophilus already knew it. Luke just wanted to give him a detailed account to build his faith up. That's it. Wasn't the start of the message. Luke was telling us what was being spoken from the beginning. And that's why through the whole of the Bible, when you add together what's written in the Gospels with what was taught by the apostles, that goes back to the prophecies in the Old Testament, it is so cohesive that there's absolutely no way that these blind guides are doing anything to diminish the glory of the gospel. Now, I want to tell you a personal story. Back in the 80s, I witnessed a vehicle incident in which a guy in some kind of a Jeep vehicle, a 4x4, right in front of me, he veered across the road and ran into a parked car. Backed up, did it again. Backed up, did it again. And off he went. Well, I followed him. I was able to see him, take very good visual memory of what he was wearing, what he looked like, that when the police took my description and went to the house, the license number spoke or had recorded, they picked him out of a whole room of people. My detailed eyewitness description was so detailed that the guy fessed up and took a lesser charge because he could tell he wouldn't be able to stand up to my testimony. So, did the police go around and say, you know, Monty, all the people who didn't see it outnumber the people who did see it, so we can't take your testimony? No, they were quite happy that I had such a detailed testimony they could take to court. Today, these blind skeptics are telling us that all the people who didn't see something nullify the ones who did. They say things like, oh, but they're in the Bible. Oh, you mean all the eyewitnesses collected what they saw because it was such good news and they wanted everybody to know about it? And the people who didn't see it outside the Bible nullify the eyewitnesses? I don't think so. Okay, yeah, I'm having too much fun with this. It's serious. But when you really step back and listen to people like Bart Ehrman, and you compare them to people like Luke, who was hearing all these things that he describes in his gospel account, and he was just one of many people compiling a narrative so that we could have that today, and someone like Bart Ehrman, who can't even see any of it, nullifies my testimony of what I see? Never. Not going to listen to that. Now, one of the eyewitnesses that Luke knew about was the Apostle John. Listen to what John said. He said, "And the Word became flesh and dwelt among us, and we have seen his glory, glory as of the only Son from the Father, full of grace and truth." My question to you is, are you listening to skeptics who have not seen these things and letting them tell you that because they're blind to them, John didn't see it? That Luke didn't hear it from all these eyewitnesses and write a compiled account that if it wasn't good, somebody would have said so because they all knew what happened? So there's my encouragement. Faith comes from hearing. Hearing comes from the word of Christ. That's what we have in the Gospel of Luke. That's what we have in the New Testament. That's what we have in the Bible, the word of Christ. So let the word of Christ dwell in you richly, so you will know how to admonish one another. You will know how to sing psalms and hymns and spiritual songs with thanksgiving in your heart to the Lord. That we know these things when blind people like Bart Ehrman can't even see them. Jesus said, "My sheep will hear my voice, and they will follow me where I lead." I hear Jesus' voice in what Luke wrote, and Mark, and John, and Matthew, and Paul, and Peter. I hear Jesus' voice in that. And it is so detailed in its collection, its compilation, that we have absolute good reason to put our faith in the Word of God and live by every word that comes from the mouth of God.